Dagdi agus Fáilte. Hi, hello and welcome. It's John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and I have a question to answer today, and it's a question from one of our patrons over in Patreon, and it's a very interesting question. It's a very interesting and well thought out question. And if you've been in any of my classes or any of the courses or videos, you know how I feel about questions. I love questions. It's a fantastic opportunity to view the world through someone else's perspective. It's a gift to be able to challenge your own insights, your own views on things by seeing it through someone else's perspective. So I love a good question. And this, in my opinion, is a good question. So to read it all out for you, Jace was in contact with us. I am interested in guidance around sexuality and the other world. Of course, it's very personal to individuals involved. I'm more wondering if ourselves, or if yourselves, as in us, the Irish Pagan School, or anyone else in the IPS TUA, has given significant reflection specifically to the ethics involved. Here are the main things which I've been thinking about. Part 1. The deep relaxation induced by otherworld journeying can produce all sorts of physical sensations which the body may interpret as sexual in nature. What is our ethical responsibility, if any, when this happens? Is it important to back out of the journey immediately, to keep going as we were and wait for it to pass? I can imagine arguments for just about every side of this issue. And then secondly, enthusiastically consensual exchange of energies is a key part of magical craft for many earth-based spirituality practices. And for some practitioners, it does extend to the exchange of sexual energies. Is there any precedence or guidance for this in the Irish tradition? I remember Laura and John both mentioning in different videos that the ancient Irish views on sex were primarily that it was an act of offering oneself in hospitality. Is this a hospitality that makes sense to extend to spirits, deities, etc., or just fellow humans in the here and now? Is there any insight into how consent ought to be navigated? Important note, I understand that Morrigan is not about being sexualized herself. Not that she needs any reason for this boundary, but it is perfectly understandable for me, given her history of being appropriated and objectified in a neo-pagan context. Thank you very much for giving some thought to this query. I hope it hasn't made anyone unduly uncomfortable. As a neurodivergent person, I'm known to speak matter-of-factly about issues that others may find to be quite charged. Very curious to know what you all make of some of these questions and if they're even important to grapple with or merely distractions on an Irish pagan path. Hopefully now the rest of you can see why I think this is a really good question. It shows us a lot of insight, it shows a lot of perspective and personal perspective, but also a bravery around the query of this. And it's important to be able to break this down. It's important to be able to kind of analyze this and kind of see what we can go through. So again, Jace, if you're watching this video, thank you very much. I'm honored and humbled that you would bring the question to us, and I'm going to do my best to give you a response. So firstly, at the top end, yeah, Laura and I kind of have many conversations about ethics in our practices. It's a huge, huge thing for both of us to try and be as ethically aware of our spirituality and our culture as a native person kind of teaching and practicing in this way. We often joke, if we were just a little bit less ethical, who knows how well off we might be able to be, but that's something that, grinds both of us in the wrong way when we see people, even people of Irish, indigenous nationality, in a way abusing our culture or cashing in on neo-pagan ideals or shifted perspectives or incomplete or incorrect information, or just absolutely going out of their way to fabricate information from a fictional circumstance. It really, really does harm, not just to any individual who experiences that themselves, but then the ongoing cultural impact. We did a video on it was a roundtable discussion. It's on our YouTube there, about the impact of bad information. And it was off the back of a person who published a book, and they were trying to conflate the Irish word for old woman, which is a sha-van or a shan-van, as an amalgamation or a different way of saying shaman, which is completely ridiculous. And so many parts of that book were contra to the actual folklore. They were encouraging people to engage in practices that both me and Laura would say that is actually dangerous. That is spiritually dangerous practice to be going and engaging with. I won't go into any directing any energy towards that at the moment because there is that other video out there. But ethically speaking, it is very, very important for both me and Laura to be able to stand over what we teach as best we can. And yeah, we make mistakes, but we'll always try and, you know, come back to those and address it when we do. As we always say, when we know better, do better. So yeah, it is something that we have kind of considered and talked about, this awareness of sexuality and sexual interaction. And it's something that we, both of us, accept is very unique to individuals. And in many ways, we've touched off in different angles, but some of the classic neo-pagan practices are, from a certain perspective, very gender essentialist. You know, you have male energy and female energy, masculine energy, the male divine, the female divine, and then there's this whole kind of sexual connotations and sexual union that's brought into it. And again, nothing wrong with people expressing their own exchange of spirituality in their own ways. But if your spirituality is not evolving and growing to be inclusive and to be aware of non-binary individuals or to be aware of asexual or the spectrum of sexuality, then your spirituality is not as open or inclusive as you would like to believe it is. But I suppose that's not the question. I need to kind of bring it back. But we have, yes, it is something that we here at the Irish Pagan School do have conversations about. And people have approached us and it's like, you know, I'd love to just have a Dagda and a Morrigan retreat, you know, where John and Laura kind of talk about and teach, you know, couples practices or like, you know, couples workings practices from a Dagda and a Morrigan perspective. It's scary, but it's also fascinating. And, you know, who knows, maybe in the future. But anyway, to dive back into the specifics of the questions of Jace here, the deep relaxation induced by otherworld journeying can produce all sorts of physical sensations in the body. Absolutely, yes. We know from neurological sciences that a regular practice of meditation has physical impact upon your neuroplasticity, which is the ability for your brain to make new pathways and to broaden and open and experience your own existence. So it's very real that meditation, any form of meditation, can have a very physical response upon the body. So when the deep relaxation comes in and you have a possibly sexual experience, what is our ethical responsibility when this happens? The first thing I will always say to anyone in any way, in any journeying practice or any kind of meditation practice, be it solo or work with anyone else, your first ethical responsibility is to yourself. Regardless of the divinity, the divine, the deity, the group, the other individuals, your teacher, your partners, anyone else involved, your first ethical responsibility is to you, because it's your life, your journey, your practice, and your growth. So if at any point, any part of the otherworld journeying practice that is created by Laura and taught here at the Irish Pagan School makes you uncomfortable, you are the person who gets to decide what level that is at. No one else can define that for you. No one else should define that for you, because it is your own spiritual growth. And if you are within having an experience, an otherworldly sexual experience, and it's making you uncomfortable, then absolutely 100% stop. You know, the whole practice of the teaching with the opening section of moving through yourself and moving down to the beach and moving into the meditation, followed by the ending of the teaching, which is coming back out of yourself, back to the beach, back up the pathway and back to the door. All of that practice is to move you safely into another world experience or journey, but then bring you safely out of another world journey. If at any point you are made uncomfortable in any way, shape, and form during another worldly practice, your first ethical responsibility is to yourself. And the practice is there to back to the beach, back up the road, back out into yourself and close that door behind you. So that is where you need to be. That is something you need to be comfortable of doing. And again, it's that idea of put a video about personal sovereignty into our free kind of resources. And that is hugely important, hugely important to not just understand, but to live by, you know? And as I've always said, if someone doesn't respect your personal boundaries, they're not respecting you as an individual and in your entirety. So I'm not going to sit here and say, if you feel this X, do this, or if you experience that, what, you will be the best judge of it. But if at any point you are any way uncomfortable, follow the practice, leave the journey, document your experience, and then when you're ready and feel comfortable, approach the practice again. Now, I'm never, again, it's that function of personal sovereignty, personal awareness, and personal consent. You should never feel that you need to stay in a situation that might make you feel uncomfortable or dangerous at all. Just because there's a teaching practice involved, just because there's another 5-10 minutes in a meditation to go on. If at any point you're uncomfortable, finish it, leave, step, follow the practice, close the door behind you, and return to yourself. Now, that's not to say that any of these experiences will be dangerous, will be uncomfortable, or will be upsetting. Some of it could be quite opposite. You could have a quite pleasant experience, a good engagement, and it could be just that energetic exchange or that kind of connectedness exchange that happens. And if you are in that kind of bond or have built that kind of relationship with deity or otherworld entity, or with yourself in the other world, as long as you're being consensual, aware, methodical in your practices, and you are, again, looking after your own sense of self, your own sense of personal sovereignty, and following the practice out when you leave, so that, you're closing that kind of spiritual loop as you end the meditation by closing the door behind you. Then engaging in your activities within that journey is your own journey. It is literally your own spiritual growth. What we here at the school teach is a practice, it's a method, it is a skill set, is a tool set to be able to move into a state of meditation, to move into a guided otherworld experience or journey, and then to come back from that. What happens within the space of that journey, what happens on the beach, or what happens in the islands as you kind of develop and grow into that spiritual practice, into that spiritual journey, is part of your own growth, your own personal growth within the journey. But again, your primary ethical responsibility is to yourself and your own safety and your own security and your own comfort. And not even deities should be considered as overruling that or overwriting that. Now, different conversation for like working for a deity or having a particular kind of obligation to a deity, but that again comes off the back of, for example, I'm sworn to the Dagda, I'm sworn to the Dagda service. I have qualified and quantified what my relationship with him is. And that is the work that I do every day as part of that. We have built a relationship where I feel a friendship towards my deity. I feel a connection towards my deity. And to be honest, I'm a bit ride or die. Like if the Dagda calls, I will row it out. Absolutely, we ride it on. I'm there. But if at any point the Dagda was to ask me to do something that made me feel uncomfortable, I would take the first step and say, hold on, why is this being asked? Is this part of my growth? Is this something I need to consider? Is this something I need to assess? Is this something that I just need to stop? Is this a checking of my own boundaries? I came across an experience with it, and I will not tangentially go out of it, but this links to the story and informs part of the next section. I have been writing the Dagda's tales for many years now. But at the very, very beginning, there was one tale that a lot of people wanted me to write, and it was a tale that made me very uncomfortable. And it was the tale of the couple's ford. So from the Irish lore, it is said in the preamble, the pre-stories to the second battle of Moytura, that the Dagda leaves the gathering of the men of the goddess with Nuada and Gwivnu and Dean Checht, when they're talking about, is Lugh going to be the guy to like lead them into this second battle with the Fomorians? He leaves that kind of congregation, that confluence of conversation and commitment, really, as they talk about there is going to be a war coming, what are we going to do? He leaves that and he goes to consult with his partner, his wife, who is then said to be the Morrigan. And as part of that story, he meets her in the ford on the River Unshin, and it says that they couple on the ford, and then the ford thereafter is known as the bed of the couple. So, this is in essence a sex story. From a certain perspective, yes, he goes and there is this sexual exchange that happens between him and his partner, and I was very uncomfortable. I knew I had to write the story. It's a very big story. It's a very important story. And it involves two very prominent deities who have had a big influence on my life. But I was very uncomfortable about it. And so I steered away from it for quite a while. And it was only when the director approached me is like, listen, you have an unfinished story. This story needs to be written. And I was like, but I am uncomfortable because I don't know how I'm supposed to write, in essence, what is a sex scene between two deities. And I chewed over it. I procrastinated on it. I'll be honest, I got full on writer's block for a good period of time. But eventually through talking more with him, through assessing my relationship more with the Dagna, I began to realize it wasn't about sex at all. It was about, as Jace mentions in the question, a consensual, energetic exchange of sexual energies. And so what I wrote in that story, Couples Forward, it's available on dagdabard.com if anyone ever wants to read it, is a ritual practice. It's an exchange of sexual energies between these two partners so that she can fulfill her role as to find the prophecy, to tell them where the mind's going to land, what is going to be the challenge. And it was only when I managed to kind of sit with my discomfort, to assess why I was feeling discomfort, and to then move around the dialogue, to consider around the dialogue, I found that different perspective. And so this does move us to that second part of the question, which is, enthusiastical consensual energy exchanges form a key part of magical craft for many earth-based spiritual practices. Yes, absolutely. Even if it is an energetic exchange between you and a candle flame, or you and a plant or a tree, or you and the sun, or you and the moon, there is still some form of energetic exchange that you're offering as part of your magical practice. And that can, for some people, include sexual exchanges. Now, whether that's physical sexual activity or actually just an exchange of sexual energy, which doesn't have to always be linked specifically with a physical sexual interaction. But at the end of the day, it comes back to that first protocol of ethical responsibility, which is to yourself. Now, the mention there, Jace mentions in the question, the Irish views on sex were different. They absolutely were. Our modern views on sex come from a much different kind of cultural upbringing, a much different cultural influence that arrived later on in our evolution, or in our colonization, should we say, of as Irish people of other countries or other kind of courts or religious practices. Let's be honest, religious colonization had a big fucking impact on that as well. So Jace mentioned specifically a section which I do want to check on here, very particularly. Irish views on sex were primarily that it was an act of offering oneself in hospitality. That is one particular example. So it's not, that comes from records in the old Irish lore that the laws of hospitality for certain castes of people within the Irish society could include women of an upper class offering what was called the friendship of their thighs, which meant that these female presenting people within the court had the right to, offer themselves in a sexual connection or liaison with someone who came to visit under the rules of hospitality if they wanted to. Now, there is a certain amount of caste privilege involved there. And there was also a certain amount of patriarchal expectations that were involved there. So it's not just, as much as we would like to believe that ancient Ireland was an egalitarian utopia, it fucking wasn't. Moving down the caste system, of a tua or a tribe, anywhere below the surname, the upper, top caste, many cases women were still considered property. When you get right the way down to those who were not worth cows, or those who were non-landed individuals, or were taken in from the sea, they had zero rights whatsoever around their own sexual autonomy as well. So that particular example of the friendship of the thighs, it was specific from a particular caste of society. But even then, the attitude was not one of prudish prohibition around sexual interactions. Even if we look at the Ulster cycle, Queen Maeve of Connacht, some of the things before she took any wedded partner at all, she was like, listen, anyone who's going to be married to me has to be as generous as I am, has to be as courageous in battle as I am, and has to understand that I will have other lovers and must not be jealous of that. And the only times that there was trouble in any of Maeve's relationships was when the partner broke with one of those rules, be it like her first husband becoming jealous of Allard, or then her second husband Allard becoming jealous of Fergus MacRoch. So it was well known that Queen Maeve had other lovers. It was said on some circumstances that she would have 7 men or Fergus, and it was said of Fergus that he would have 7 women or Maeve. So the relationship with sex and sexual interactions was very much different in ancient Ireland. But again, all we have to go on is the stories, is this lore, is this information. So it's important to not put our own biases and our own perspectives of our modern cultural evolution upon the past, but then also not just take whatever was written down in the past at face value, because that's only one facet of the culture at the particular time, which doesn't include the broader kind of aspects of it, which is why we need to look at the full view of the culture, the religious practices, the systems, the political systems, the caste systems, to get a deeper, better understanding of sex in these ancient kind of times. But for many people, even from ancient times up to more modern times, there were weddings of convenience. There was year and a day weddings. So people would meet at a Bealtaine festival. They would be wedded for a year and a day to finish by the next Bealtaine festival, in essence. And that could be a convenience for wedding for work, wedding for for growing, or wedding for companionship. So there were many different types of unions, and some of those may not have involved sexual interactions or sexual expressiveness, or it may have. But to bring it back to this area of hospitality, or this connectedness within a journey, I don't think it should be upon anyone to feel in any way obligated to offer a sexual exchange or an exchange of sexual energies, be it physical, non-physical, or whatever, as a matter of hospitality. There is a uniqueness to our own energy, a uniqueness to our own energetic self, as there is to our own physical self. And so giving of that uniqueness should be something that should be considered kind of as an important kind of thing, the same way that for many magical practices, be it blessings or cursings, you need some physical part of a person, which is why many people who are energetically inclined will be careful about where they dispose of their hair, or anything like that at all. So the energy or the essence of a self that comes along, or that you kind of travel through when you are on an otherworld journey or following through a guided meditation practice, is something that you should consider of value. We are, all of us, very much of value. And so no one should feel compelled to offer an exchange of sexual energy, but if they are invited to offer an exchange of sexual energy, it is down to that personal choice within the moment, within the journey, remembering the first priority, which is your responsibility to yourself, your ethical responsibility to self first. So I know people who, have otherworld relationships. We know, even if we look at the lore, if we go back to the lore itself, there is many stories of women traveling out of the otherworld. The otherworld is not the underworld. Clarification. But there are many stories of women coming out of the otherworld and finding liaisons and relationships with men in this world, who then travel into the otherworld to find them. And to form unions. Like, when we look at the Leinster cycle, we have Uiscin and Tiernan Nog. We have the Voyages of Bran. We go back to Angus MacGoch, the young son of the Dagda, ends up in the Aisling Angus. He has a vision of an otherworldly woman for over a year, and he ends up in a love sickness with her, which brings him almost to death, because he can't find her in this world. And then eventually he does, and they form a union. So there is a concept of a Lannon She, which is an otherworldly woman who has relationships with people in this world. And there's also what's his name? He's not the Gon Kiana, that's the no head, but no, I don't have it. There's another kind of fairy lover. I don't have the Irish word to hand. But there's a male fairy lover who is said to sing beautiful songs and to woo women in, and they have a fairy lover relationship for a period of time. So there are many instances in the lore in our Irish folklore, in the older lore, but in the more modern folklore as well, of these interactions. Some Lan and Shi become connected to a particular individual or a particular individual's family. Some family are said to be descended from Lan and Shi, in that like these women of the Shi give birth to like people of our world, and the family trace lineage right the way back to this, individual, this Lan and Shi, or this Ban Shi, or woman of the Shi, who then invariably looks over the family for many generations after. So there is a lot of information and a lot of stuff to be considered when you're looking at this area of sexuality or sexual exchange within an otherworld journey practice. Jace, I think, again, it's a fantastic question. I'm really, really delighted you asked it, and that you are having those considerations, and that you are kind of, considering everything from the ethical point of view. As for neurodiverse, yeah, I'm as neurodiverse as they come as well. And we all understand things in different ways. And sometimes it takes that bravery of just saying, I have this question and I would love to have it answered. And yeah, topics can sometimes make us uncomfortable, but it is about taking the slow steps to approach the topic, to being able to say, okay, well, why am I uncomfortable? What about this makes me uncomfortable? If the main question is not something you can answer straight away because of a discomfort, then answer the question of your discomfort first, or your comfort. Why do I feel so comfortable about this? Why do I feel so comfortable in this practice or this energetic exchange in many ways? Sometimes that might be because of transmigration of spirits. You might know the energetic signature of someone else from previously beforehand. Or sometimes it might be because there is some building or ongoing or trust relationship there as well. So I don't want to answer this question from, oh, yes, it's all fear and danger and all the rest of it, because there are many stories of people living happy relationships and happy life relationships with people and deities, and not the specific deities. I don't think I have any stories specifically about deities, but otherworld entities from Lan and Shi, Banshee, and the male fairy lovers. I don't have, like, it's on a book right behind me. I know exactly which book. I'm gonna have to look it up as soon as I finish the video. But it's important to remember that your first ethical responsibility is to yourself, because it is your otherworld journey. It is your growth. It is your spiritual path that you're following on. And if at any point you are made uncomfortable by something, or even overly comfortable by something, have that question of yourself, ask the question of yourself, and just be aware that, you're doing it consensually. You're doing it with, as Jay said, enthusiastic consent. And again, this not just applies to energetic circumstances. This doesn't just apply to, if you consider it, it's not just about our spiritual growth or our spiritual practice or guided meditations. This applies in real fucking physical life as well. In the same way that you would consider getting into a physical relationship or a sexual relationship, be it any other form of relationship or friendship or whatever beforehand with the person, the same category of assessments should happen for dealing with otherworld entities. And if it is not full-on enthusiastic consent, then the answer should be no until it is. And, speaking from experience, enthusiastic consent makes it all best. So, yeah, I hope that has answered your question, Jace. I'm, again, delighted that you asked the question. It's a fantastic question. It shows that you're really kind of considering things and trying to break it all down and to kind of rationalize through and understand. So, again, to answer finally and firmly for everyone, your first ethical responsibility is to yourself. It is your otherworld journey and your absolute growth. And that's why the energetic practices and the guided meditation journeys that we teach involve coming out of the journey as much as going in. We get asked by people, oh, can I not just skip the coming out part? And it's like, no, don't skip the coming out part, because that's crucially important to build the energetic muscle memory of how to safely leave a journey. And it means that if something does happen, if something does make you uncomfortable or make you feel unsafe on your guided meditation journey, you have built this practice of, this is how I get out. This is how I pull the ripcord, back on the boat, back to the beach, back up the track, back to the door, close the door behind me. It's the dark behind my eyes. That has to be second nature to each of us so that we can consciously leave our journey practices in a safe and responsible way to ourselves. And apart from that, if you are on these journeys and having these experiences, which are going to happen. They can happen. At the end of the day, remember, it is your journey. It is your practice. It is your process. It is your energy. And that makes you responsible, sure, but it also makes you empowered. And as I said at the start, if anyone doesn't respect your boundaries, they don't respect you. And so feel no hesitation of being empowered within yourself to look after yourself. And, that is probably where I should end this before I ramble on too much, because all of us need to look after ourselves. Remember, each of you is a unique expression of humanity in this existence and energy in this existence as well. No matter how many times you've transmigrated, your energy still has a unique flavor of vibration that makes it intrinsically you. So look after it, take care of it, look after yourselves. And until the next time, Slán. Goodbye.